6. Homework. Do your homework before contacting a music supervisor. First, understand the typical timelines for movie and TV projects, along with information about how and when a music supervisor gets involved so that you can reach out at the right time. Peruse the graphics that go along with this section closely to give you a sense of the importance of early involvement in the process. There's also a graphic containing the production and airing schedule for TV shows. Later in the module, you'll receive tips for putting together an estimated schedule yourself. We'll analyze movie and TV timelines and the involvements of music supervisors in the following order. 1. Movie timeline. 2. TV timeline. We'll also highlight some differences between 1. Major TV shows, such as Mad Men, Game of Thrones, and so on. 2. Reality TV shows, such as The Hills, American Idol, and so on. 3. Sitcoms and soap operas, such as 2.5 Men, and so on. 1. Overview of a typical movie timeline and involvement of the music supervisor. Productions with smaller budgets tend to have smaller production timelines compared to major studio productions. Principal photography, filming, for a movie is typically around 48 days, 8 weeks, and sometimes as little as 20 days. Even though this might seem like a short time, the fact is that much happens both before and after the filming process itself. A supervisor for a movie can have as much as 1 year from start to the final mix. Looking at the budget can give you a good indication of the likely timeline and length of the process. Keep in mind that some movies just feature custom scores and virtually no outside songs. Just because there's a score or music supervisor involved doesn't necessarily mean they won't consider outside songs. To better understand a music supervisor's involvement, let's break down a timeline for a movie production of 15 months. Month 1 through 5. 1. If the music supervisor is picked during pre-production, they will spot the script for music cues and on cameras. Month 6 through 9. 2. After getting the film editor's first cut, music supervisors will temp in the score and music tracks they think could work, which can help in the film director's cut. A music supervisor might also be involved during the filming on set when an actor is supposed to perform on screen to ensure the lyrics are correctly sung or performed. Month 9 through 11. 3. During the assembly of the director's cut, typically lasting 6 to 10 weeks, a supervisor works to temp in songs and find good replacements as well as continuing to work on the score. Month 11 through 15. 4. After a locked picture, which is when post-production officially starts, songs that were temped in will now try to be replaced and cleared for licensing, along with making sure the score is perfected. As you can see, the music supervisor may get involved at different stages of the production. However, since payment for music supervisors is commonly a flat fee for the entire project, it's in the interest of the production team to get the music supervisor in as soon as possible. There are other cases where a music supervisor is brought in much later in the process, if all they are needed for is the clearing of a few songs. There are sometimes cases where the supervisors are only paid to clear songs on a per-song basis, but this is more the exception than the rule. Let's look at each of these stages in greater detail and see what happens. Months 1 through 5. Looking at our graphic, we can see that as early as the first month, a studio may reach out to a music supervisor to share an available script. Based on previous relationships, a studio, director, or producer may bring the production team on board with them, including a music supervisor of their choice. When this is not the case, music supervisors are invited to meet with the producers and directors to persuade them that they are the right candidates for a specific project. In preparation for their meeting with producers and directors, music supervisors are likely to have already reviewed the script and taken notes on required music, while breaking the script down into individual scenes. They do an initial assessment to decide where adding music could augment the mood of a scene. The first thing a music supervisor looks for are on-cameras. These can either be songs that need to be sung by an actor, a band that needs to perform in a scene, or songs that will otherwise need to be in the picture as it is being filmed. For definite on-cameras, a supervisor will contact the appropriate people as soon as possible. Without early clearances, the production schedule can be delayed or even stopped altogether. The initial meeting could take place as early as month 1 or 2, where a music supervisor brings in some music she thinks could potentially work for some scenes based on her notes. Many times, the music they bring in does not look at budget constraints, but is brought in merely to establish a baseline to see if the initial direction is right in terms of sound and feel. Often, music that is presented early on gets married to a producer or director. Even if a song that comes in later would fit much better, it may not get picked simply because another song came in first and convinced the director of what the particular scene should look, feel, and sound like. What does this mean for you? Well, you should be one of the first people to suggest music for a project. Try to find a music supervisor on a new project as soon as possible in order to be one of the first to influence the project's musical direction. This requires calling the studio or production company and doing detective work on who the director chose as the music supervisor. You'll need to be very good on the phone and establish good relationships. The next best method is to look out for press releases or similar announcements where a supervisor might be mentioned. These are not the most reliable, however. The next option is to take advantages of services or publications such as Music Supervisor Guide, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, and IMDb to find out who the music supervisor is on a given project. Months 6 through 9. During this time, the project is undergoing principal photography, which is also when an editor starts to put together the editor's cut for the director's eventual perusal. The music supervisor could be involved in a number of different ways at this stage. For one, she could be present during the actual filming to make sure that on-camera appearance is done correctly. During filming, they will view dailies that will most likely stay in the film for possible cues. In addition, the music supervisor could already be collaborating with the editor to insert and select music that could go with particular scenes. It might seem premature to select certain songs at this stage if the director decides later to remove an entire scene. Nevertheless, it enables them to cut down on time and get the process going. The key point here is that many people seem to think that the music selection process doesn't really start until the shooting has been completed. Yet this goes to show that this isn't the case. The music supervisor doesn't just get involved at the post-production stage. Months 9 through 11. The director works on his cut, typically taking 6 to 10 weeks. During that time, the music supervisor, director, and editor collaborate to temp in the score and the music. Composer spotting sessions begin for the original score, either in the pre-production or in the production phase. Composers start writing the music. The music supervisor, director, and editor go to the composer's studio and listen to their demos. If the composer has been hired before the music supervisor is hired and the score is already completed, the music supervisor makes sure that all of the score cues are on the cue sheet. If a temped-in song fits but is too expensive, the team will need to find alternatives. Typically, the supervisor will already have 4 to 5 alternatives as backup options ready to go within the budget. A supervisor at this stage will often turn to trusted sources to find replacement songs. Month 11 and beyond. Even though the director's cut is done at this stage, the song selection hasn't necessarily been completed. In this time frame, the supervisor will clear the licenses and negotiate fees. The real spotting for music starts after a picture locks, which happens in the post-production phase, around 5 months for movies. After the studio has seen the film, music supervisors manage the recording of the original score with the composers. In the meantime, the music supervisor, director, and editor work to find replacements for temp tracks. The post-production phase is where the film is really put together. Motion graphics, special visual and sound effects, computer graphics, and music are added to the film. This is also the time when a lot of the negotiations begin with rights holders so that the final drafts for the sync and master licensing agreements can be drawn up. If the project is still in its early stages and a music supervisor wants to use your music, then this gives you additional exposure to have your music heard by the director or producer. At the same time, if a music supervisor were to contact you later in the stages of production, you also know that the negotiation power is tipping in your favor if you have a song that the team knows fits the project. Now, you must be very careful about how you negotiate, because a movie has a specific timeline and distribution plan. The team wants to meet the deadlines. As a result, they often have multiple alternatives for songs, so you should keep that in mind when navigating the negotiation process. You should now have a good idea of a typical timeline and the involvement of the music supervisor in a movie project. It's important for you to understand both at which stage the supervisor is in and how that could affect the decision-making process when selecting music. Now that you know what a typical movie timeline is, one of the main takeaways should be to get involved as early as possible. This typically maximizes your chances since you can build a relationship with that supervisor over the course of the project and also be the first to have your song temped in and woo the director with your music. 2. Overview of a typical timeline for a TV show. 1. Major TV show. Mad Men, Game of Thrones. The production schedule for an entire season of a TV show can span several months, even stretching from 1 year to the next, where shooting can be for as few as 8 to as many as 13 episodes. Sitcoms and reality shows can potentially shoot up to 23 episodes. Here are some sample filming schedules. The production timeline for TV shows vary. While some episodes finish production the same week they first air, others are filmed weeks or months in advance. You might be interested to know that television episodes, like movies, don't follow a linear filming schedule. The director may choose to record episode 2 before episode 1, or may choose to film the final episode of an entire show before filming the other seasons. This happened for the sitcom How I Met Your Mother, because the creators knew the actors would no longer look the same in later episodes. There are independent ways that you can figure out when a show is scheduled to begin filming without having to contact the production house or music supervisor. Given today's access to information through the internet, one can easily Google a production schedule or press announcement that may indicate filming for a new show. You can even use Twitter by following the lead actors or production companies who oftentimes tweet about what they're currently working on. It's detective work, but it gives you a pulse on what's happening. To estimate the weeks a music supervisor is likely going to need music, you need to find out how many episodes are scheduled to be filmed. If it's a completely new show, then your task would be to monitor the upcoming filming schedule for new shows. Shows that have been picked up for an additional season are typically announced in the news a year prior, along with the number of episodes being planned. Here's an example of a press announcement for the show Mad Men. Quote, "The show maintained its regular production schedule, with the writer's room opening last August. Filming on the first 7 episodes began in October. The actors took a 4-week break in March to catch up on scripts before shooting the last 7 sets, or segments." End of quote. Knowing this information can allow you to estimate how long the entire production is going to take. You can even cross-check this with the previous year's schedule, as they'll likely be similar. Depending on the budget and complexity of the shoot, set design, costumes, makeup, and so on, you can expect a show to take between 1 to 2 weeks of shooting. Game of Thrones has a 2 weeks of filming per episode schedule. Keep in mind that this differs from reality shows or sitcoms, which are typically shorter to shoot. I'll go into greater detail about production specifics for these types of shows later in the module. Typically, it takes 2 to 3 weeks to edit a 1-hour action-adventure show such as CSI. Once the edit is done, the music is added, along with sound effects and Foley. On average, sound companies want a total of 5 days from turnover to mix, where mixing itself takes 2 to 4 days. It's not uncommon that the final delivery of an episode ends up being just 3 business days before the actual air date, which happened for shows such as Lost as an example. It's also been the case that the final delivery occurs on the same day of airing. Some premium television networks, such as HBO, require a much longer lead time due to international needs. In this situation, a final delivery of 1 month before air date is common. The lead time is increased to meet international distribution and promotional deadlines. The point here is that sometimes you might think the project is still active when, in fact, it's already been completed. You may try to get in contact with the music supervisor, thinking that the project is still being worked on, when in fact, that project is already done. Keep this in mind when trying to figure out the scheduling, especially if you haven't kept track of the start or end dates of the production schedule. Just because certain sound companies typically work 5 days from turnover to mix, this doesn't mean the supervisor doesn't get involved much earlier. Similar to movies, music supervisors may very well be involved during the filming, in addition to the time after the shoot wraps. The supervisor will also likely receive the script so that she can review it for needed music cues. Now that you have a general understanding of what actually happens behind the scenes from the music supervisor's perspective for major TV shows, you now also have an understanding of the typical timelines for when you want to reach out to the music supervisor. The music supervisor can be involved for an entire season, and what you want to concern yourself with is making sure that the show is still being filmed, which also means that the music supervisor is likely working on that show. Map out the production schedule so that you can understand the start and end dates in addition to how far the supervisor is in a particular season to make sure your contacting her is still relevant. Some shows get busy filming in the summer, while others do it in the fall. It's always good to check. You may also want to research how many songs are typically required on a show. There are a few resources on the internet, such as TuneFind and others, where you can get a sense of how many songs are used on the show. For shows such as Mad Men, it could range from 1 to 7, with an average of 3 songs per episode. You can make an educated guess based on the genre of the shows as to what type of music might be required. For example, a sci-fi show might use the type of music that other sci-fi shows use. For an example, electronic music. Knowing this information will hone your skills in how you pitch your music. 2. Reality shows. Reality TV shows have a tight schedule. The music selection process may start on Monday and need to be finished by Friday. For most shows, a music supervisor chooses anywhere from 10 to 25 tracks. It's common for a music supervisor to use both music coming in through a blanket license deal from a music library and music from indie artists. When trying to submit music for reality TV shows, it's important to look at the general theme of the show. For example, if the show is geared towards a teenage audience, following teens discovering their love and heartache for the first time, then you're likely to hear music with these themes on that show. A heavy metal song is not likely to be heard on that show. This relates back to what we described earlier as knowing your genre. The good thing about reality TV shows is that because so many songs are used, it's easier to get placement. Many license deals for reality TV shows pay less than a placement on a major TV show. It's still a great opportunity to obtain a placement on one of these shows for credibility and credits to add to your resume. MTV uses music generously in its reality TV shows, but is well known for not paying any advanced sync licensing fees. Music publishers only make money on the back end from performance royalties every time an MTV show airs anywhere around the world. Now, considering MTV's global reach, the performance royalties could add up. MTV is known to use sometimes dozens of cues in music-heavy reality TV shows like Pimp My Ride. 3. Sitcoms. Let's look at sitcom shows such as Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, and 2.5 Men. The filming schedule for a show is typically 5 days, during and after which the music supervisor will clear any music. Footnote: here's what happens on an average week from a production schedule, not looking at a music supervisor schedule. Monday, the team meets to have a table read of the script to make sure it all flows. Tuesday, rehearsals start. Wardrobe, hair, and makeup are all taken care of. Wednesdays, more rehearsals. Thursdays, shooting that can't be done in front of an audience if that's planned. Friday, if there's a studio audience, that's usually done on Fridays in the evenings, with the rest dedicated to additional shooting. Note that sitcoms require fewer songs, averaging 1 to 2 songs per episode. In fact, sometimes no songs are used when a TV show has a custom score. This is important because it also means that the supervisor will have fewer opportunities. If you want to follow up with a music supervisor, keep in mind how much music he or she will need over the course of filming. Key takeaways. Understand the typical timelines for movies and TV shows to determine how and when to market your songs to music supervisors. Be the early bird who gets the worm. Approach people early and increase your chances. Prepare to pitch the right music by first reading the synopsis of the show and understanding the likely themes that will require your music.